Yeah. Woo.
You're old now. Hey, look, this is going to happen more times than not at your age.
It's
Trust
going
me.
to get worse, not better. I'm an old man.
Right. Now I can go back and remember to congratulate you on your birthday.
Thanks.
Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast.
Well, hello there, FC Dallas Curious fan. Welcome to another edition, number 85, of Third Degree, the podcast. Hi, how you doing? My name is Peter, and I'm joined by my two good friends to talk all things soccer here. First off, our local English dude, Dan Crook. Hello, Dan.
Hello, Peter. Thanks for having me back. I was really a bit concerned that Tyler was stealing my gig.
Yeah, I gotta be honest. He's pretty good at this.
He is.
Yeah.
It's very good.
You're gonna have to step up your game, mister.
I don't know how I do that. I don't do well under pressure.
Come on. And of course, oh, look who it is. It's your hero, my hero, and our birthday boy, editor and founder of thirddegree.net, the 50-year-old Buzz Carrick. Come in, Buzz.
Yeah, proud to say, Peter, I've already had my first senior moment. I'm not proud of that.
And that's the only reason why Dan and I are forgiving you.
Yeah. Well, and also, Dan, no worries unless Tyler starts writing a bunch of articles. You're not going to be replaced.
I'm glad I'm still useful.
Okay, so guys, I know that people come to this podcast for all their Football Club Dallas stuff, but I thought since the last game was kind of a bummer and nobody's really looking forward to the playoff game, I thought I'd start off with the topic du jour and something a little different. USA men's national team 0, Wales 0. Buzz, I'm hoping you watched the game, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Dan, did you watch it?
No, that's not one of the conditions of my green card.
You watched the England game today, I assume, right?
I did, and I think by the sounds of it, we were equally bored watching those two games.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. This wasn't too not entertaining. All right, Buzz. US 0, Wales 0. Any immediate reaction to the new look USA?
Well, it was important to go in, I think, understanding that if the if the U.S. national team would have been playing a World Cup game today, that this would not be the team. But this is a bunch of young kids that they're going to develop over the next 2 years or whatever. So that's really exciting, and that's what they should have been doing since the day they got eliminated. So I went in with a scouting sort of mindset to watch some guys that I don't see very much of or see at all, and try and just sort of get a grasp of where I think the talent level is. And so 4 things I wrote down that really jumped out at me that I thought were super exciting. Number 1 is the collective athleticism and range of the players, particularly noticeable in the midfield with Weston McKennie and Tyler Adams. The ability to cover large swaths of ground, really exciting. Number 2 is the reaction time. Even guys that might not play well, like when Conrad would turn it over, for example, it was noticeable how quick they were in transition, how quick they responded. That's really exciting because that's hard. You can't teach that. That's innate reflexes, and it's a really high watermark for real high-level talent. Number 3 is the quality of touch was really high, I think better than I ever can remember seeing from a national team, which probably says a lot about our whole collective pool and its development and progression. And the last was the speed of play, where there were moments where it lagged, but overall I thought it was pretty good. Now, the things that are not so great, of course, is that offensive as an individual is instinctive. You can look at Gio Reyna's example. But defensive as an individual has to be learned and taught. And when you get into team concepts, the defensive team concepts are quicker and easier to learn. Hence, a team that's never played together like this one is fairly good defensively pretty quickly, but offensive concepts are really, really hard to develop, and those obviously were not great. So those are the things that you can look for to develop over, hopefully, this year as the team plays and competes for a spot in the World Cup.
Yeah, here's the thing. I was excited to see the lineup. There's all sorts of names and faces that to be honest, there's a couple of guys on this roster I had never even heard of prior to a week ago, much less know anything about their particular game. But those things stood out to me too, Buzz, and there was a level of confidence on the ball and a willingness to kind of take the game to Wales that I enjoyed. They didn't look frightened or scared, and I enjoyed that about this particular performance. The thing that I was surprised by, and maybe it was my one big criticism, was when they finally got the ball into the final third, that whoever received the ball high with their back to goal, and it could have been any of the number of the three guys playing at the top or one of the midfielders that had kind of made a run deep, they all just seemed to be very reluctant to turn their defender and attack the goal. They all seem way more comfortable just playing backwards or laterally or trying to start some sort of combination passing that ultimately would very quickly break down and stop the attack. And I really got frustrated by that. I was hoping to see some more incisiveness and a little bit more creativity, at least in the first half of the game.
So you're saying the U.S. men's national team plays Lucci ball?
It's funny that you say that, because I will be honest with you, there was a moment in time where I thought, oh my God, I'm looking at an international version of FC Dallas. This is except to be fair to these guys, at least they were getting the ball closer to the box before they decided to play backwards. It wasn't just playing it about 40 yards wide, outside the penalty area and then going all the way backwards and recirculating the ball. So it was a little bit more progressive than that. But yeah, that was the one thing I did think about.
Well, both Berhalter and Lucci want to play the modern sort of Klopp-like system. They want to build from the back and they want a high press. And the high press takes longer to learn and longer to develop. So they're stuck with a lot of the build-up kind of stuff. And if somebody else is going to low block against them and sort of sit back, which happens a lot at the national level, it's not surprising. Then sometimes that's hard to break that down. So especially when you're not playing together very much before this.
Well, I hope you agree with me that Tyler Adams and Weston McKennie were clearly the two standouts for the U.S. today. I just, those two guys, there were so many individual moments by each of them. Their recovery speeds, their willingness to attack the ball, some of the things they did in passing were all really, really good today.
Yeah, I thought Weston McKennie in particular was the man of the match. I thought his performance was dominant. You can tell that he not only is on a team that plays at a very high level. It's like he plays on a team that's at a very high level.
Yeah.
And when you combine the way he carries himself and the work rate he puts in, somebody else said this first. I'm not the originator of this idea, but he should be right up there as a candidate to be captain at some point going forward, because he has all the qualities you look for in that position as a captain.
Yeah, I enjoyed the fact that Tyler Adams did not look happy that he was being subbed out. Like, you couldn't tell if he was mad that he was being subbed out or mad at how the performance had gone, or maybe a combination of those things. The one player I don't think most of us knew anything about was this Musa kid who's playing at Valencia and playing at a very, very high level, playing very well for Valencia. And man, there is a lot to like about that guy. And the one moment that stands out for me was early in the second half. He picks up a ball in the center circle and he starts driving at Wales' back line and creates all sorts of problems. Obviously, it didn't turn into a goal, but it was one of those things where you just wanted to see somebody take a ball and run at the Wales back line, and I finally saw it in him. And I hope they talk that kid into staying with the U.S. because he looks to have a lot of promise.
Yeah, it's another one of these United States melting pot cases where we can pick up a player. Since I remember the first one I remember is David Regie and Thomas Dooley, way back in the day, picking up these kids that are descendant of Americans, either through our military around the world or people that have come to America at weird times and ended up being an American just by happenstance. So you got to take advantage of those guys in the international world. And I love we found that guy. He's great.
Yeah, if he ends up playing for the U.S., and turns out to be some sort of U.S. hero, I can't quite figure out the fact that he is only able to play for the U.S. because he just happened to have been born in the United States because his mom was on vacation. This is the true story, is actually a really cool story, or kind of cringy that's how we ended up getting a player. I don't know which one it is.
Anchor baby, triggered.
You think so?
No, I mean, it's,
Well, he didn't stay.
No,
He
no, I don't. That's what I'm joking. I don't think that's what's going on there. I think it's just a confluence of events that led somebody to be eligible for our country and a citizen. So, I mean, that's the rules, right? If you're born here, you're a citizen. So,
all right, Dan, you're a neutral. You're a neutral on that. Is that a janky way to get a world-class player on your national team? Is just the weird coincidence he happened to have been born here and then left a week later and never spent another moment on our grounds?
Oh no! I mean, it's it's whatever. England has a similar thing with the Channel Islands, where anyone born on them is eligible for any of the home nations. So, like Matt Letizia being probably the best example to play for England. If it's how you get them's how you get them, as long as it's legal. Right. I'm just waiting for the player that's born on a plane, and is by default the nationality of whatever country that plane is registered in.
You could include Weah in this scenario too, because remember, he's only an American because his dad lived in New York in order to get away from the fame of his life when he was a big-time international player.
Yeah, that's true. That's another one. Yeah, I know some of them are super weird, but that one in particular, and also, to be fair, credit to Berhalter and his staff for sourcing that kid, because how did they even figure that out? Like the level of research that had to have been done to figure out there's a kid playing in Spain who's been playing in the English youth teams, but I think his parents are Ghanaian by nature, but somehow they figured out that he literally was born in New York City. Because his mom was on vacation. That is an interesting little side twist to his story. Anyway, whatever the case is, he looked really good today, and I'd love to see more of his game. Last couple of notes. I was really surprised and had forgotten how good John Brooks can be when he's healthy. He looked outstanding today.
Yeah, the question with him has always been the health, but he's a rock in the back. And look, has all the qualities you want at that level. The other side, I don't think that Miazga is going to keep that job very long, because Chris Richards has a couple of qualities, including passing and skill with the ball, that are at a higher level than Miazga. So I think that Richards will not have a lot of trouble taking that spot with just a little bit more progression.
Yeah. It is kind of cool to look at a team and say that a U.S. men's national team that you could look at and say there's two guys on it that play for Barcelona. And speaking of which, Sergiño Dest is everything he's hyped up to be. And I'm telling you now, I'm going to call dibs on the idea that I think he has a little bit of a Clint Dempsey swag and style to his game that looks really cool when you're coming out of the back like he does.
I think it says a lot that a player that you think looks like Dempsey is now a right back for this team. That's kind of cool. I mean, that level of talent to be that far back up the pitch says something about the progression of the United States.
Yeah. Well, it was certainly not Wales' toughest team, and so it's really kind of have a real clear picture of what to take away from today's game, because that wasn't a super dangerous side by any stretch of the imagination. I guess we'll find out more on Monday when they play their next game on Monday. And Dan, just so you don't feel left out or anything, how did the England game go today?
Well, they won 3-0. It was not the most eventful game. A pretty young team out, and Buzz would really appreciate that the team lined up 1 through 11.
The U.S. would almost do that. The U.S. was supposed to do that. If Pulisic had been healthy, probably would have.
Yeah, they probably would have. In fact, they had all of that set up today. So, that would have. And you know what? And that's the other comment we should make about the game real quick is you couldn't help but watch this happen before our eyes and not take at least a minute to wonder what it would have looked like if they had Christian Pulisic in there instead of Leggett or whatever.
Well, and Sargent, there's definitely some pieces missing. It's Grand Assault game. It's an early game. Lots of pieces missing that will be in there. I mean, there's some MLS guys that'll be in there when they get into the real meat of the stuff. Zardes, if nothing else, maybe Altidore still,
No.
I know, but, right this minute, if you need to win a qualifier, you probably would want Altidore over almost anybody else if he's healthy.
Yeah, see, I don't even at this point, do you think he starts Altidore?
I'd have to see what Berhalter's doing with him, but, it's got to be him or Zardes. I don't think that if you had a qualifier today, I don't think you'd start Sargent. Now, 2 years from now, you want it to be Sargent. So you got to start him on a bunch of times in things. But like right this minute, it would be Sardis or Altidore.
In watching the game, the one takeaway that I have is that I'm pretty convinced that the biggest question mark of this whole quote unquote new U.S. men's national team is Greg Berhalter as the manager, and while I do feel like he's kind of backed off on overcomplicating matters, I watch what happened today and still think, man, he overcomplicated matters by trying to play a false nine and throwing Leggett in there and some other things that he did. That's the one thing to me that still sticks out is the big question mark.
Yeah, I would agree with you on the overcomplication. I mean, I don't mind a desire to play high level, but I think it takes time to work those things in your system over a couple of years. It's very difficult to walk into a national team and play that way. That's not easy to do.
All right. Anything else about that game or the England game that we'd like to talk about before we move on to what most people came here for in the first place?
Well, as a fellow broadcaster, Peter, I'm curious what you thought about the commentators on this game. One of my friends that's a casual soccer fan texted me and said, are they going to talk about this game at all? Because it was basically like a fanboy love fest. I mean, they were so excited. They're like, oh my gosh, we have players that play with Cristiano Ronaldo. Well, that's what you're supposed to have. You're supposed to have guys playing at the top 5 leagues in the world. So I would like a little more discussion about the actual game itself and what you're seeing in front of you and what the tactics are, and a little less, stroking of egos, if you will, and just partying and fanboy kind of stuff.
Yeah, I have to assume that in the bowels of Soccer House in Chicago, there are people on the media and marketing side that recognize the need to reinforce the fact that they threw a team out there made up of guys that are playing on some pretty incredible teams. Like I said earlier, they don't have one; they got 2 guys that are playing for Barcelona. They got a guy that's a goalkeeper for Man City, and a Dortmund player, et cetera, et cetera. And I wonder if that conversation takes place in the production meetings, and how the hosts themselves feel obligated to reinforce those messages, during the game broadcasts.
Well, I can guarantee you, as a person that does production, and without even being in those meetings, I can guarantee you that is absolutely part of the agenda, because this team hasn't played in a year, and Fox wants to build up the ratings over the next whatever as they qualify and head for a World Cup. So it's absolutely part of the agenda.
Yeah, it was weird because as in the lead up to the game, it dawned on me, because this is something I care about. I was like, I wonder what the kits are. It's been so long since they've played. I couldn't even recall off the top of my head what the current lineup of U.S. men's national team kits are, or if they were going to be rolling out some new ones today. And I had to go dig around on the internet and figure, oh, that's right, they got an all white kit, and then they got that navy kit with the quote unquote milk stain on it. And then it turned out they were wearing the white. Actually, I don't mind that white shirt with the navy shorts. That's a good look.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the U.S. tradition is the all white look, but in terms of my enjoyment of kits, the blue shorts for me with the white really pop. I love the way that makes the white look. Now, again, history and tradition of the U.S. is the all white. That's fine. I just really like the blue combo personally better.
What did England wear today, Dan?
Much to Buzz's likely disgust, they wore their blue away kit while Ireland wore its white away kit.
You mean England wore their
Italian
jerseys?
Well, it's blue and red.
No.
Is it the baby blue one?
Nah, it's like a royal blue with bright red. So it's like reversed what FC Dallas used to be when the training gear would burn your eyes.
Where did they play the game?
Wembley.
And they were both wearing away jerseys, away kits.
Yep, made no sense.
That doesn't make no sense. That's
Absolute
so bad.
Kit crime of the highest order.
Yep, kit crimes.
Not good at all. Okay, well, we'll set aside international soccer talk for now and dive into what I suspect everybody came here for. Here we are, FC Dallas. Let's look at the bright side. Football Club Dallas is in the Major League Soccer 2020 playoffs. That's the good news. The bad news is they're backing in as they lost badly in Minnesota in the final game of the season, 3-0. Now, I'm just going to be very transparent and honest here. Man, that first half was really not very entertaining, and then when they allowed them to score a second goal a couple of minutes into the second half, I turned off the game and didn't bother watching the rest of it.
Yeah, the team basically turned off at that point too. I mean, we have to be real. This is one of the biggest giveaway games we've seen under Lucci, and maybe even going back further than that. It's a pretty brutal performance across the board.
So Dan, let's do this. You haven't gotten to chime in a lot. Let's let you turn on your microphone and come in here, and why don't you give us an assessment of what you saw in Minnesota that evening?
Right, turned on. Buzz mentioned something in his breakdown, and it's completely true. The notion of being too careful. The first 2 goals were off of back passes where they were trying to be cute. They were trying to be, well, not be cute, I guess. They were trying to be careful, not playing too far forward, not risking a counter attack. Instead, they played, twice played a stupid back pass that resulted in a counter attack. Lucci at the time was talking about, wanting to really go for the game and not just settle for the draw that would give them the home game. He actually did again on the media call yesterday. But then I guess after actually reviewing the game, realised that the approach that he'd laid out kind of wasn't the one. At the time he was talking a lot about didn't win enough duels, which weirdly was the one statistic that actually led in. But it was a sloppy play. It was sloppy, overprotective play. It was kind of like those old Sven-Göran Eriksson teams that would go 1-up and then try and defend the lead and inevitably blow it.
Yeah, Lucci talked on the podcast, on his conference call, about how he's still learning how to win on the road, how to get results on the road, because he specifically mentioned games they've played better and lost, and then games they played poorly and won. And of course, now this one's a complete stinker. And for me, the trouble with this game is what Dan just reiterated, is mentality. It's this idea of playing. You can play. It's not a lack of effort. You can play a deeper defensive game and still be aggressive and still play on your front foot and still take adventurous moves and try and do some things. And when you play flat and sit back like this and then play not to blow it, you get these moments, and it translates across the board, because offensively too, Peter, we talked about this, their decision making was still appropriate. They had 75% of their shots in their box, but they had 9 misses, and that's out of characteristic for this team to just have flat shots that are not even getting on frame. To have 9 of them happen is just indicative of the mindset being wrong all night long.
Yeah, so I want to ask a question. When you watch that game, how much of that, because Lucci talked about this, as you said, he's like trying to take the blame and stuff, and we're trying to learn to win on the road, which all then ties back into, well, if Lucci is, taking the blame and putting this on his shoulders, and that all plays into the whole narrative about his inexperience as a coach. And then so that makes me wonder, if I'm a fan of this team, how much longer do we have to wait for them to learn to do things? Because that all feels very kind of like, I'm new at this, and you guys just need to be patient with us while we figure this out. And that just doesn't seem, I guess that's a very tired response at this point. Is that unfair?
No, I don't think it's unfair. I think the answer is that it's going to be a while, because I don't think that the Hunts are unhappy with Lucci. He's done a pretty good job progressing some of the youngsters, I think. And then this year he was handed just all kinds of insanity, between the COVID, and then all of a sudden there's these high-priced veterans coming in, some of whom are crazy high and actually really difficult to manage. And they've sort of completely changed mantras from play the kids to now we're going to go for it. So I think that they'll cut Lucci a lot of slack in that regard, and they know that they threw him to the wolves by making him a head coach too early. So I don't think they're going to be in a big hurry to change, because honestly, where are they going to go?
Right.
If they were to change Lucci, it was like, when they only hire assistants, who's left?
Yeah, I don't even want to go that far with that. Actually, what I'm trying to set up here, and Dan, I'm interested in your opinion. I'm kind of actually trying to defend Lucci a little bit, because I know he's doing the right thing and trying to shoulder the blame himself, and he's trying to, phrase this as we're learning how to win. But the two of those three goals that Minnesota scored were just tactical errors or just flat out stupid mistakes by two of his players. Lucci had no control over that. That's just bad play by his players, right?
I mean, it's in part, it's the message you give. If you're telling them, don't play yourselves into danger, if you need to recycle the ball, then they're doing exactly what you're telling them.
Yeah, but that has to come along with be smart enough to look up and see where you're passing the ball first, right? I mean, at some point, it's on the players to not do stupid things like that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it was, even the second goal. Barrios makes a terrible pass, and Ricarte watches it go by. He does, he could have chased after it. He could have prevented the Minnesota player from getting on the end of it. He doesn't. It's individual errors all over the field as much as it is tactical. But if you want to go with the bigger influence, it's going to be the message of being more careful in possession, but be more mindful in possession, I guess. He talks a lot about positive possession with a purpose, and we just didn't really see that enough of that. We saw a lot of recycling the ball back, rondo out of it, which is very much the Lucci ball mentality. The problem he's going to have is we're talking about a second-year coach, but and I think we can all agree Oscar Pereira was the club's greatest coach. Made the same silly mistakes year after year. If there was a two-legged playoff right now, I could tell you that for a fact that Orlando would go in to whoever they're playing, set up completely defensively, blow it, race to a 3-0 deficit, and then not have a chance in the second leg, because that's just one of those habitual things he couldn't get out of. And there's a chance this could be one of Lucci's of being overly cautious at times. We just kind of have to see where he develops and hope it kind of falls on the right side.
How much of what happened that night in Minnesota is on Lucci, Buzz, in your opinion?
40%. I'm with you that there's a significant amount of it is on the players. The part that's on Lucci for me is probably like starting Santiago Mosquera when he can only go half a game, and it's incredibly lazy on top of that. That the guy wasn't ready to play. You should have stuck with, if you don't like your other options, which should have been somebody like Ematua Masi, who, by the way, came in and brought great energy. If Fafa Pico can't go, which I don't know why he can be on the bench and come in if he can't start, because it's not a fitness thing. Just stick with your Hollingshead and Nelson combo, which worked pretty well the previous game. So Mosquera for me is a major problem, and when you sort of throw on that kind of player, the rest of the squad's like, well, okay, we better cover up for the mistakes that are going to happen, because there were some doozies from that guy.
And since I admitted I didn't watch the whole game, is there anything to report back on that anything good came out of the midfield three of Santos, Ricarte, and Ferrer? Because up until the point that I turned it off, it was not a good look that evening.
Well, they got subbed out around, was it 53 minutes? Yeah, and it's
all three of them?
No, not Ricarte.
Ferreira and Mosquera did together.
Okay.
I remember thinking pretty vividly. I remembered that Mosquera was there because he had 3 really bad giveaways just before it, but I forgot Jesus was playing.
Yeah, it was funny. I thought it was another really odd kind of off-putting performance by Jesus in the 47 minutes that I watched. But so I clearly remember, like at the 43rd minute, the camera panned to Santiago Mosquera, who I don't even think had made a run to that, like a significant run in the moments before, was just huffing and puffing, and he just looked so out of breath, hands on knees kind of thing. And again, to your point, Buzz, I don't understand why Lucci would start him.
Well, my guess might be that and when I tried to think about it as Lucci would think, I couldn't really come up with anything other than he wants to try and get him ready for the playoffs. But my other thought was maybe it's a last chance, because his initial MLS contract is probably running out. So they're going to have to decide if they're going to keep him or not. And so maybe they're trying to give him as much time as possible.
Well, somebody was tweeting today about the the list for the expansion draft for Austin FC, and I was trying to sell Austin on the concept of selecting a left-wing Colombian player on a DP contract just to see if we could push him off that way.
Yeah, we'll do a roster protection list coming up when that happens, and that's a name that probably might not get protected, to be honest with you. But that's a different podcast. We'll do that one later.
If they protect Santiago Mosquero, I mean literally, it's torches and pitchforks at that point. I think.
Well, I don't want to give it away for you, but the way protection works, homegrowns and Generation Adidas players are automatically protected. That's like half this roster.
Yeah.
So there's only I actually started working on it already, and I don't want to give away the prize, but there's only like a couple of dudes that need to be that are going to get exposed because they have so many homegrowns and Generation Adidas players.
But I did create a classification just for Mascara. That's the insistence list. Please take him.
So the other kind of weird thing about this game was the surprise appearance of the U23 Brazilian goalkeeper that I think most everybody had forgotten was even here. Felipe started in this game after Jimmy Morrow turned up injured. Dan, do you have any hot sports opinions on the performance of one Felipe up in Minnesota?
He, at the start, looked like a player who hadn't played in 11 months, which is conveniently just what he is. He seemed to grow a bit into the game in terms of his command of the box reach, kind of where he was venturing to. The only thing I really don't like about it is he has that South American tendency to punch the ball. There was one where it was a really easy catch across as it was going away with no one around, and he punched it out for a throw. It kind of reminded me of Raul Fernandez when he would purposely react late to a shot. Well, that too, yeah. He would also purposely react really late to a shot to try and make it look spectacular. And we saw more than a few crappy little grass cutter shots just roll in because he was trying to show off.
Yeah, you could throw a water balloon at Raul Fernandez and he'd try to punch it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the thing is, Raul Fernandez was, he was the big guy. He was the Peru #1. He was the hero for his team, and he'd played in France, albeit the second division, and he was the guy, and kind of, you couldn't tell him anything. Felipe, at least, is, he's 21, 22. He's learning, he's growing, he's got a long way until his peak, and he could be a project for FC Dallas if they choose to buy him.
Yeah. Well, hold on a sec, Bugs. The one thing that I noticed about Felipe was that I didn't notice anything about Felipe. Like every time I see a new goalkeeper, you can generally identify one unique skill set or trait. They're really strong in the box. They're really strong in the air. They're good with the ball at their feet. They're good at shot stopping, or they're very vocal. I didn't see, and again, he hadn't played in 11 months, so it's hard to be too critical or anything about the guy. But I didn't see any particular asset or identifying skill set in him, and maybe that's a good thing. I don't know.
I thought he was a little flat-footed. Now, as Dan says, maybe that's just not playing in 11 months, but for a young guy, I expected of his hype, I expected a little more lateral quickness, more like Jesse, and I didn't see very much of that. But in the end, you got to remember that this deal is one of those Andre deals, with maybe a little input from Drew in terms of if we buy him now, will he play in the Olympics, and will his value double? And that's basically what's happening here. It was just they got lucky that they got to put him in for one game and get a little taste, because most of their evaluation is going to happen in training.
I think as well, you have to. It's kind of hard to judge him just on that one game because he's conceded 2 goals before he's even really had anything to do.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I thought he could have done better on the first one. I for some reason I felt like that while that was a bad giveaway on Ryan's part and all of that, and defenders out of position, for some reason I felt like that was an opportunity, a shot that definitely Jesse gets a hand on, and maybe even Morrow saves. But again, he hadn't played in 11 months.
I felt that way about the second one.
Oh, really?
So,
okay.
Yeah, it just depends.
Yeah. All right. So, Buzz, let's do now our favorite segment. How fast is the Pepe hype train rolling today? How was young Ricardo Pepe in this game for you?
Well, a little hit or miss. This one wasn't one of his best performances. There are moments that are great, a couple of shots and 3 key passes. That's really exciting, those moments. But then, he got dispossessed once and had 5, missed flubbed turnovers or whatever, which was the most on the team. So hit or miss, but that's okay. He's not supposed to be starting. He's not supposed to be the guy yet. He's supposed to be learning and getting, trash time and little appearances here and there. So not great, but, that's okay.
The other question I have, and Dan, tactically, I'd be interested in your opinion on this, because since last week when Buzz revealed the info about Rito Ziegler, and his whole thing about COVID and the mystery behind, his benching and all of that, and now we're, I don't know, stuck with Brisson, or they've just gone ahead and decided to stick with Brisson. I was watching this game, and is it just me, or is Brisson way too aggressive in chasing people upfield and very consistently out of position when Dallas turns the ball over and is in transition defensively?
Well, I can't actually comment on that, because when I tweeted something about him reacting pretty slowly, he responded to me and said he disagreed.
That's right.
Was that really him?
Yeah, it was.
Oh, I thought that was a fake Twitter account. I didn't realize that was him.
Yeah. No, he's sometimes needs a bungee cord tied to the goalpost, which, it can work. Sometimes he makes these lung busting runs to support an attack, albeit he's a bit slower, so he generally doesn't play a part in that. But having those numbers forward commits to extra defenders. Unfortunately, sometimes, as with a lot of fullbacks, his timing is off on when to actually stay back in cover and when to chase and try and press. So having Matt Hedges there, someone who can kind of make up for that, as he did with Walker Zimmerman's many brain farts, is always helpful. As we saw with when it was Reto and Brisson together, Brisson goes and Reto tries to just delay and not really stick a foot in, and ends up on his ass while the striker's gone around him. So, yeah, he definitely does go a little bit too quickly.
Yeah, it just seems to me that when Hollingshead is pushing forward, Brisson seems way too willing to chase a mark upfield. And then in this particular game, there were a couple of times early when Finley would get in behind Hollingshead, and Brisson and Hollingshead both are way upfield, and there's just acres of space.
It's perfect if you're a third centre back, because you're the attacking guy, you're the spare who can press and get up. When he's playing 2 centre back, you can't do that, and that's something they've got to teach him. Maybe he grew up in a system where he was playing like a 3-5-2 or something, but he's not going to be doing that as much for FC Dallas.
It's one of those deals where I know I'm never going to see Matt do this, but man, I would just love to see Matt melt down and start screaming at people. He
nearly did on the call the other day.
Oh, did he?
He was pissed after the game. We all know Matt enough to know that he doesn't really do emotion very much, which is why he's not one that a lot of people will get comments from, because he doesn't really react to too much. But he was angry. He was, in part because 46 minutes they're 2 goals down, and not because Nashville have done not because Minnesota have really done anything well, just because 2 really crappy back passes have put the defense really up against the wall.
Well, that was a really crappy way to end the season, and historically is never a good sign into backing into the playoffs, especially because this year it is not 2-legged. It is all one and dones, and that means Dallas now has to go on the road and not to one of their more favorite places. I guess on the bright side, at least it's not having to go to Seattle again.
Wait, I've got a shred of hope for you.
Oh, yeah?
Who was top of the MLS form table going into the final day of the season?
Kansas City?
No, it was FC Dallas.
Really?
Yeah.
That's crazy. I didn't
You might have to
realize
explain
that.
what that is, Dan. Some people may not know the form table is.
Yeah, so the form table is a look at your form. It's your last 6 games. So FC Dallas had been the best in that last 6 games. They led the home. Well, they still lead the home table, and overall and in away, I think they were somewhere like halfway. So, off the back of those wins away, so not terrible. Terrible. So it's not quite backing in as much as it is. They've just really slowed down a lot. Maybe the gearbox has gone in the car and they're just kind of like, well, we're going to come to a stop eventually.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I think the big reason to be disappointed about this performance was the importance of getting it. I mean, it was all they needed was a draw to get a home game, and to not even really show a significant amount of fight and end up in a 3-0 loss like that. I think that's the thing that I think has most people not looking forward to, or at least walking into the playoffs going, yeah, don't.
How about stumbled into the playoffs?
Okay, yeah, but that's not good either, right?
No, it's not. It's definitely not good.
Right. I mean, it in many ways, it kind of really reduces the value of the work prior to that, the 4-1-1 record leading into that game, right? Because that they had worked really hard to get back into form, and all they needed was a draw to get a home game, which would be so important, and now they don't have that.
It's kind of funny because on the call, I guess they'd sort of realised that with the way the playoffs are this year, that if they win and LAFC win, they kind of luck back into a home game.
Right.
So they were really positive about that.
Yeah.
I forgot about that. Yeah, that's true. Home game, here we come. Yeah.
Okay. So, yes, now they on the 22nd. Is that correct? On November 22nd is the game? Yeah. What day of the week is that?
Good question.
Ends in a
It's
Y.
a Sunday.
My birthday's the 24th. What is the...
It's a Sunday.
And so it is Sunday the 22nd. Okay,
Yeah.
Yep, you're right. Sunday the 22nd. So they got to go to Portland. Like, again, bright side, it's not Seattle, but Portland's been playing pretty well, and it's a different surface, and I guess you don't have to worry about the Portland crowd this time. But goodness,
That works both ways. A lot of players love playing in front of that sort of crowd.
Yeah, that's true. And in the inverse, maybe Portland doesn't get the boost that they normally get because the crowd's not there. So maybe that does go both ways. But Buzz, is there any reason to think that Dallas fans have any hope of getting a result in Portland?
Well, the reason to think that they do is twofold. And if you're looking for reasons why, the first reason is the nature of this team, which plays better against good teams. They play up to the level of competition and they play down to the level of competition. And I'll give you an example because the schedule is so weird this year. Look at how they play against Sporting Kansas City. They played really well against Sporting every single game. So maybe they'll rise to the occasion and play well in Portland. And the other reason to be, it's a stretch, but maybe that'll happen. And the other reason to be excited is because Portland is missing humongous chunks of their team. So Andy Polo and Felipe Mora are both gone from international games and won't be back in time because of the quarantine and travel, right? Sebastian Blanco, Julio Casante, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, and Jarslo, these are so easy to pronounce, Niezguba, are out. And then they got Espria, Bodley, and Abobasi are all questionable. Abobasi's concussion. So you got a chance that you're going to be missing a bunch of guys whose name I can't pronounce, but they're all pretty good players. So
basically both of their strikers are potentially out, which is convenient.
Yeah. So, I mean, the Dallas is, compared to that, relatively healthy. The guys that were held out, Fafa and Hara, are both back. We know Jimmy is going to back in training this week. Brian Acosta is probably back next week in training, but that means he won't be starting. It means he'll just be available. So they're about as healthy as they've been in a while. And if they can rise to the occasion, then they got a shot.
Well, it is Major League Soccer, and it's all about parity. And certainly in one-or-done situations, anything is likely to happen. And so I guess there's thank you, Buzz. That does make everybody feel better.
If you show up with the attitude you took to Nashville, where you were determined to get a result, if you bring that attitude from a year ago in Seattle, if you bring those road attitudes, then you've got a shot.
All
This
right.
is also against a team who, while chasing the Supporters' Shield, just lost 1-0 at home to Colorado. I mean, they're prone to a slip-up, and maybe they play down to the opposition as well when they're, when they don't have Valeri being the best player in the league and missing two key pieces up front. They're not invincible by any means, and they're probably going to be hurting off of the back of dropping out of the Shield race so late.
All right, but this does beg the question, and that is this: what does Lucci go to Portland and do something wacky, like play a 3-man back line?
Yeah, I'm actually kind of worried that he will, because for the first time in a long time, he has 2 weeks to think about it, which means that he has time to work on whatever it is in training. And Lucci usually tends to overreact when he feels overmatched. And he'll do something weird like a 3-man back line. I think in this scenario, I think the 3-man back line, I think, is less likely to be a reaction, because he usually does that against teams that have a ton of pace up top or like our heavy counter teams. And I don't feel like Portland's those things. So what I think is the overreaction I think you could get is the Hollingshead at left wing overreaction. I know that Fafa's technically healthy, and for me, when they've played their best is with Fafa at left wing when he's on. Now, he's a little bit hit or miss too, but when he's on, that's when they're at their best, I think. But that Nashville game, Lucci was super proud of that result, and you remember that's Ryan Hollingshead at left wing, Peter. You even asked if that was the left wing solution. And
right.
Nelson, who's a defensive first outside back. So if he's looking to go in there and keep it tight and to grab a game, I think that there's a chance the overreaction is Hollingshead and Nelson on the left side.
Well, I think so much of this is going to depend on what kind of performance he gets out of the middle of the park. And I think we've talked about this before. It kind of goes back to the old adage of how Mauro Diaz goes, this team goes. And we talked about that now being a part of the Thiago Santos story, which is game in, game out. This team really tends to perform well when he is firing on all cylinders, and maybe the 2-week break gets us a refreshed Thiago Santos.
Well, I would hope so. I certainly agree with that. When he has time to recover, and when Ricarte, who is consistent, very consistent in my opinion. So for me, it's going to be how does Jesus Ferreira go at the 10, because he has no other options at that position. Other than...
What about Acosta? What's Acosta's situation?
Well, as I said, he'll come back to training next week, which means he'll only have a couple of days to get him ready, which isn't enough. So, I mean, maybe he could knee-jerk and throw him in. The other guy you could put in there is Santi. I mean, who wants that? Maybe Emma. So, I mean, look, we all know it's going to be Jesus in that position. So, I mean, how it goes is going to be a lot on that. If that guy is making those in-box runs and relieving pressure on Franco Jara, if he's checking back and building, and if he's trying to press and putting in that high work rate defense, that's going to be, for me, the key to the midfield is that guy. Because I'm sure Santos will be fine with 2 weeks off between games.
Yeah, because you got to figure out you can't play a 3-5-2 because that doesn't really put Barrios in his best position and kind of screws with him. And yeah. Okay, well, and kind of the weirdness of this, because of the international break, we'll actually have another pod edition, I assume, between now and the game. But is there anything else that you would just off the top of your head predict in terms of what to look for against Portland?
The only other thing is you might question whether Brisson would keep his spot, because he pretty much had a stinker. And I'm going to go ahead and say that he will. And the reason that is because we've been talking about this shenanigans going on with Ziegler. We're not 100% sure why all that went down the way it went down. Well, I did more research, which just actually included me just Googling, frankly. His contract's up. Ziegler's is. So I think if you keep that in the back of your mind as you look back to all this stuff that's going on with him, that will contribute to the way you look at this whole COVID sit out and him announcing before the team, blah, 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 and the fact he hasn't played since. I think that's all connected, if you will. So I'm gonna predict that Brisson will indeed keep his spot from here on out, no matter how far they go.
All right. Do either one of you feel like this team is missing Ziegler's left foot free kicks?
No, not particularly.
That Ricardo's pretty much got it covered.
Okay. All right. I just wonder if that ever went into the calculation of sitting him.
Well, and Hara's got PKs covered. So it's, and Brisson is slightly quicker. You lose something with his game, with Ziegler's game reading and control. But, you got Hollingshead on the outside anyway and Hedges on the other side. So it's not that big a deal, really.
I have no way of proving this, but my sense is that Reto is just better tactically. Like he seems to be in position better most of the time, and aforementioned comment about Brisson chasing people all over the field kind of stuff.
Well, no question. Ziegler played in a World Cup. He's a significantly higher level of player, but 35 versus 27, 28, big difference. And that's the makeup, is the slowness and the age versus the wisdom and experience of a guy who played in a World Cup versus a guy who did not and is prone to massive mental farts, which is what cost him his career at Gremio.
All right, so this will be an interesting experiment. Dan, subtract contract politics and whatever beef may be going on between him and the front office aside. Do you start Rita or do you start Brisson in Portland?
I would actually maybe say Brisson just to keep the guy who's getting some form.
All right. Well, then you ruined my other my alternate take on that question. Is now add back in the contract politics and beef with the front office. Do you start Ziegler or Brisson? But you ruined that. Damn you, Buzz. Do you have a preference?
If you never would have gotten benched, I would have said ride Ziegler all the way. But now I think over the last 4 games, when you had some pretty good success with Brisson, now I think you have to ride Brisson. And it's nothing to do with the politics. It's just the idea that you had some consistent results with a guy. I know the last one was bad, but you don't bench a guy off at 1 game. So now you ride Brisson.
You ride the lukewarm hand.
Yeah,
lukewarm. Tepid.
The Lucci warm hand.
That just sounds weird. That sounds COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just want. Yeah, I saw an interesting. I think Buzz, you tweeted it. I guess the Brazilian edition of ESPN did an article about Brisson.
Yeah, Dan found that. It's a lot of talk about how adjusting to the league and how the league's a lot better than he thought it is. Of course it is. MLS is always better than everybody thinks it is. And in particular, that he was now comfortable. The most important, interesting part was that he said his contract is up. And then the translation says he has 2 options. I think that's probably incorrect. It's probably team options.
There was another before I read the the full ESPN one. There was another one where the translation to English was a little bit clearer, and it definitely said team options.
Yeah, because a player option is extraordinarily rare in MLS and even more rare with FC Dallas. So it's almost certainly the team option, which is why he said in that article in particular that he wanted to sit down with the team because he wants to be back and wants to stay here. So clearly he knows what we've said all along, which is that he's overpaid for a backup. And if he wants to sit down and take a pay cut, I'd be more than happy for him to come back as a backup because I think as a third center back or as a backup piece, that's great. But there's no question, and this is really something we should be talking about later on in a different podcast, but there's no question that left center back position needs to be upgraded. But it was still an interesting piece of news that hit, I guess that was earlier today.
And okay, well, anything else about the Minnesota game or the Portland game upcoming that we want to touch on before we move on?
I think that's pretty much everything I had on my list. I think we've pretty much exhausted the possibilities there.
You haven't heard from Thomas Roberts at all? How Scotland's going or anything like that?
As far as I know, he's still in quarantine. He had to go the full 15 days.
Oh,
so
okay.
He'll get out of that at some point.
There is one small thing about Portland. Did ask Lucci, Yeah, we kind of, I guess, between us, really just expressed the concern of do they have to fly in and out same day? And he did say they will be flying up the day before the game, but heading out immediately after. So they at least
That's better.
aren't doing the 2-hour time difference, getting off the plane and going straight in.
The only thing I would say is it's a shame that this is happening. This game is happening in the COVID year because a game at Portland is a red letter must do if you're a soccer fan trip in your life. Unquestionably, I've been to a game there. Specifically, I got to go to a Seattle game when it was 4-3. It was so much fun. One of the probably the best game day experience in the United States is a game at Portland. So
my wife and I went to a game in Portland also when they were playing Seattle, and without question, it is the most European-esque soccer event in the country. It's amazing.
Yeah, and I'd be all in on recommending this as a road trip for fans, except that we're in the middle of a pandemic. So I'm definitely not recommending that because there's going to be nobody there. But, and travel would be dangerous, quote unquote. So I wouldn't do it. But some other year, put it on your bucket list because it's phenomenal.
And before we end the podcast, did we talk about the fact last week one of the soccer jersey Twitter accounts picked up on the thing that we posted, I don't know how long ago, I guess it was last April, of the powder blue away jerseys as the next design. Did we ever talk about that?
No, we didn't talk about it, but that was an interesting moment when it went viral months later. That was fun.
Yeah, that was funny. But it does lead me to the question, do we actually know, or have we heard anything about what the new away jersey for 2021 looks like?
Well, I was chatting with somebody the other day that mentioned that something about the colors that they liked, indicating that it's not white. And that's one of the things that we have heard is that Adidas has loosened the reins on the white away kits because they've heard the feedback that everybody hates them. So we're expecting it to not be a white, excuse me.
Dan, you typically have a pretty good handle on like Adidas templates and stuff. Anything in particular that you have your eye on as a design template that you'd like to see them use?
Not so much I'd like to see them use, but they have a revolving template, Condivo, which is what North Texas is using, and really what all the MLS ones were based on this year. Because of that weird brushstroke stuff that's happening on the front of like the North Texas and all the quote unquote teamwear ones, they actually scrapped it after a year and they've brought in a new template for next year. So I wouldn't be shocked if if we saw some hastily arranged jerseys on that, especially if it was one that was maybe earmarked for 2022 and they just brought it ahead of year.
Well, that's interesting. And Buzz's comment that maybe they're not going to force everybody to go with white as their secondary kit is a very, very good sign. I like that. That would be good.
Oh, but the goalkeeper jerseys for next year are absolutely disgusting.
What do they look like?
They have like a fake flappy collar in black. So far, they've released 2 colors. It's like a bright yellow and orange.
Such an English term, flappy. What is a flappy color? What does that mean?
Collar.
No, I know what color is.
No,
flappy.
collar.
Oh, collar.
As the neck.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's just me not understanding what you. I thought you said flappy color, not flappy collar.
No. That sounds like someone that would really enjoy a good a duet with Pappy Check, and it would be epic to listen to. So they've teased their template. Right now, it's going to be available in yellow and orange. There'll obviously be more colors because we see with MLS every year there's like 5 or 6 that teams can go from. But it's weirdly based on like the early 2000s, and they use a lot of black in it to create elements that aren't real. For example, like a fake collar. So doesn't look pretty from the images they've got so far, but we'll see how it goes.
Well, I guess that's something to look forward to for the next year. All right. Anything else that we would like to touch on, Buzzard?
Just if you like our podcast, support us at patreon.com/thirddegree. And thanks, Pappy Check, for the music.
Hey, did you ever do the special new tier with the thing that we talked about last week?
No, again, it was my birthday, so I kind of got distracted this week. But I'm going to need to do some testing with you and Dan, and then it'll be ready to go.
Yes.
All right, we'll tell everybody what it is. Yeah, we'd love to test. Now,
hey, a
Buzz,
year ago we tested a great website that now everybody reads. So it works.
That's true. See, we're not going to oversell it. We're going to underpromise and overperform. Buzz, since it was your 50th birthday, congratulations for joining the club, by the way. Did you have a good birthday? Did you do anything fun or special?
Well, mainly I just spent time with my wife, and sort of unplugged a little bit and didn't answer work emails and basically did that for 2 days. And that was about the extent of it. We're in the middle of a pandemic, so I couldn't go crazy. But and the movie theaters are all closed, and so I'm gonna go out to dinner for a nice steak dinner in a week with because I had to line it up with some other stuff, which is not important. But that'll be my big birthday celebration, and I'll have a nice drink and a nice steak.
Is that like lunch with Lucci again?
No. It's just some personal things here with the family that are keeping me from doing it until a week from now. It's not important to talk about it here on the podcast.
Oh, well,
that sounds ominous, I know, but it's nothing.
Does.
It's just some stuff with my family. That's all. Not important.
It does now qualify you. If you ever decided to come back to play, you could come play in our over 50 league, Buzz.
I could. Let me drop 100 pounds and I'll come out there.
100 pounds?
Yeah.
That picture you posted the other day of 25 years of Buzz Carrick.
Yeah.
That was an awesome combo of photos right there.
Yeah. I came across that picture of myself from in Boston in late 95 or middle 95. So basically it just struck me that there I was as a 25-year-old.
When the league was starting.
Yeah. The league is forming basically at that point. And that was right before I worked the first season of Major League Soccer in 96. I was in grad school in Boston. So it just struck me that like that person there, was me before the league. And now here's a picture of me after the league. The whole history of the league is between these two photos. It's just sort of struck me being 25 and being 50 that was, encapsulating of half of my life with this league.
Crazy. Well,
We're
happy
old.
birthday, Buzz.
Thanks,
yeah.
man.
I'm sure you had a moment of epiphany or like the depressing moment when the AARP application thing shows up in the mail. That was my big watershed moment.
No, I actually haven't had that happen yet.
Oh, yeah. Because typically that happens like 2 weeks out from your birthday and it shows up and you're kind of like flimming through the mail. It showed up in the mail and you're like, it's like glares at you. And suddenly it gets really hot in your hand because you have this realization that the retirement community has contacted you to join their club because now you're age eligible. It's like, oh, no, it's real. This is the worst thing ever. So eventually that will show up in your mail, Buzz, and you'll want to avoid it at all costs because it'll bum you out for a good 5-10 minutes.
Well, I've already been getting, like this summer, I've getting a little bitty flecks of gray down the sides. There's only about 10 of them, but it's an ominous sign. I'm not happy about that.
That's all right. 50 is the new 30, as somebody told me.
I hope so.
I don't know if
What the hell does that make me then?
You're English. You're older than this. You're actually 60.
Yeah.
You English age very quickly. How old are you, Dan?
I'm 34.
All right, so in American years, you're 63.
That doesn't make sense.
It totally makes sense.
Yeah, it totally
Absolutely does not.
You guys, you English live a very, very hard life. You consume a lot of alcohol and you stay up very late and you smoke a lot of cigarettes and my perception is you guys age very quickly.
And wear hats.
Yeah.
Don't really do a whole lot of that.
Okay, well maybe you've lived in the United States long enough and you've saved yourself from it.
Keep checking the cholesterol and I'll be good.
All right. Very good. All right. Well, then, Daniel, thank you for your time today and participation in the pod.
Thank you.
Buzz, again, happy birthday. And thank you, good sir.
Thank you, Peter.
And thank you, FC Dallas Curious fan. We will speak to you next week for I don't know, are we going to do another one next week?
There is a podcast next week for sure, yeah.
There will be a podcast next week without a game to review, but another game I don't know. We're going to do a podcast next week, another edition of Third Degree, the podcast.
Buzz's birthday bash.
Third degree. the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast.